Young and the Restless fans. Things are getting seriously twisted over in Genoa City right now, and it is all because Victor Newman has decided to play puppet master again. Shocking, I know. And this time he is pulling the strings on Matt Clark, of all people, trying to shove him into polite society and use him as a weapon against Kane Ashby. And on top of that, Victor has gone ahead and handed Arabesque over to Phyllis this week, which is a whole other level of calculated chaos that we absolutely need to break down. It's Belinda from Soap Dirt, and today we are going deep on Victor's grand scheme for Matt, where this whole thing is headed, who might actually give this man a job, and brace yourselves, who in Genoa City might actually be willing to date him. Because YNR is clearly committed to this rapist redemption arc, and they are pushing it full steam ahead with zero signs of pumping the brakes. But before we get into all of it, please hit that subscribe button if you're not already following us. We are here every single day with the latest tea, and you do not want to be behind on this one. Alright, let's get into it. So first, let's just set the table here, because the setup for all of this is important. Victor Newman has brought Matt Clark to Genoa City and has now tasked him with a very specific mission: get close to Kane Ashby, worm his way into Kane's inner circle, and essentially become Victor's spy inside whatever Kane is building. And to make sure that plan isn't derailed before it even gets started, Victor has turned to Phyllis and asked her, told her really, because with Victor it is never really a request, to keep her mouth shut about Matt's past, to not warn Kane, to let Matt walk into that relationship with a clean slate, or at least a cleaner slate than he deserves. And I need to just pause here for 1 second because I cannot let that ask from Victor slide by without acknowledging what it actually means. Victor Newman, asking someone to cover for a rapist. And I know, for long-time YNR watchers this is not exactly out of character for Victor, but it does not make it any less infuriating every single time. Because let's not forget what Victor's track record actually looks like here. This is the same man who brought Marco Anicelli into Genoa City and put that man in Jack Abbott's life, in Phyllis's bed for months. And Phyllis had no idea. She thought she was with her husband. That is not a footnote in Victor's history, that is a defining chapter of it. And then there was Kelly Andrews and what happened to Jack while Victor had him locked away, and the fact that Victor arranged that whole situation knowing full well what Jack's circumstances were going to be. And Victor was behind Patty Williams being weaponized against Jack, twice. And then there is what happened with Billy Abbott, with Chelsea, with the drugs, and everything that followed from that. So, when people act surprised that Victor would cover for Matt Clark or use him as a tool without any apparent concern for the women in this town who have every reason to be terrified of this man, I just want to say, Victor has never shown any concern for any of that. Not once. He is consistent if nothing else. Okay. With that said, and I think it needed to be said, let's talk about what actually happens next with Matt, because that is where things get genuinely interesting from a story perspective. The most obvious thread to pull on right now is this Kane mission that Victor has handed Matt. Get close to Kane, earn his trust, and feed information back to Victor. And with Lily having just appointed Kane as Chancellor CEO, you can bet that Victor's already furious. Because Victor handed Lily that company, or at least facilitated the circumstances that put it in her hands, and now Lily is turning around and giving Kane the keys to run it. And Kane is someone Victor has wanted to dismantle for a long time. So Victor is going to double down on this Matt assignment hard. This just became significantly more urgent for him. Now the question is whether Kane actually lets Matt get close. And that is genuinely interesting because you would hope, that somebody in Genoa City would give Kane a heads up. Sharon knows exactly who Matt is and what he is capable of. Sienna has every reason to blow the whistle. There are people in this town who have receipts on Matt Clark, and they are not exactly shy people. But here's the thing about soap opera plotting, sometimes the most obvious person to warn the target never quite gets around to doing it at exactly the right moment, because if they did, the story would be over in 2 episodes. So, I think we're going to watch Kane get drawn into a friendship with Matt, at least for a little while before the other shoe drops. And part of what makes that compelling is how it plays out professionally. Because here is where I think Matt is actually going to land in terms of a job. My money is on Arabesque. Victor just handed that company over to Phyllis, and let's appreciate the layers on that decision, because Arabesque was originally Kane's company. He built it under his fake Aristotle Duma persona before his real identity came out. And Victor, being Victor, essentially stole it out from under him during all of that chaos. And now he is gifting it to Phyllis, the woman who was right alongside Victor when all of that went down. That is not an accident. That is Victor twisting the knife into Kane one more time and using Phyllis as the handle. Victor absolutely knows that giving Arabesque to Phyllis is going to get under Kane's skin, and I think he is counting on it. He wants Kane rattled. He wants Kane emotional and reactive rather than focused and strategic. And here's the extra layer. If Phyllis hires Matt to work at Arabesque, and I think there's a very real chance she does either on her own or because Victor nudges her in that direction, then suddenly Kane has even more reason to want to get close to Matt. Because now Matt is inside Kane's old company, helping run the thing that used to be his. That is irresistible to a guy like Kane. He is going to want to know everything. He is going to want to understand who this man is, what he knows, what he has access to. And Matt, playing his role on Victor's behalf, is going to use every bit of that to pull Kane deeper into a false sense of trust. Now, could Matt end up at Newman Enterprises instead? Sure, it is possible. Victor could theoretically offer him a position there as a way of making Matt look even more valuable as a potential source of inside information for Kane. But I think Arabesque makes more narrative sense. It connects more threads simultaneously. It ties Kane's history, Phyllis's allegiances, Victor's scheming, and Matt's rehabilitation arc all into one location. That is just neater storytelling, and even when Y&R is messy, Brad Bell tends to like his setups tidy. One place I am absolutely certain Matt is not getting a job is Crimson Lights. Sharon Newman is not going to let that man behind her counter making lattes. Sharon wants Matt as far away from her life as humanly possible, and frankly, after everything, she has earned the right to never have to see him again. I also do not see Sienna and Noah rolling out the welcome mat for Matt at their new Shadow Room Club. That is their space, their fresh start, and Matt Clark is the last energy they need anywhere near it. So those doors are firmly closed. Now, and I know some of you have been waiting for me to get here, let's talk about Matt's love life. Because Y&R is clearly not just keeping this man around for Victor's spy games. They are building towards something romantic for him, and when you start looking at who in Genoa City might actually be willing to go there with Matt Clark, the options narrow down pretty quickly and pretty uncomfortably. Let's start with the obvious numbers. Sharon Newman, absolutely not. Not in this lifetime, not in any alternate timeline the writers could dream up. Sharon has been through enough, and her instinct to stay as far from Matt as possible is the most rational thing happening on this show right now. Good for her. Victoria Newman is also a hard no, and for more than the obvious reasons. Victoria blames Matt for what happened with Nick and the fentanyl situation, and while I will say that Nick's addiction was already complicated before Matt handed him that pill, Nick signed himself out of the hospital against medical advice and was already deep in it before Matt became a factor. The Newman family is not interested in hearing any nuance on that subject. They have placed full blame on Matt, and Victoria is not going to be the one to revisit that verdict. So Victoria is out. Sienna, obviously, is not going there. She technically married a man named Mitch Beale, not Matt Clark, so there is a whole legal question about whether she even needs a formal divorce, but regardless of what the paperwork says, Sienna is done with him, and she is building something new with Noah. That door is not just closed, it is boarded up and spray-painted with a warning sign. So who does that leave? Well, let's talk about Patty Williams. And look, I realize that everything about this is uncomfortable, but we have to go where the story is going. Patty has a complicated past of her own, which means she is unlikely to sit in judgment of Matt the way most of Genoa City would. And Patty clearly had some kind of reaction to Matt. There was something there in their scenes together that the show was not putting in by accident. On top of that, Patty has zero future with Jack Abbott. That ship has not just sailed. It has sunk, been salvaged, and sunk again. Jack is moving forward. Patty is not going to be part of that picture. So if Patty is looking for someone to latch onto in Genoa City, and she usually is, Matt Clark is going to look a lot more available than the alternative. I am not saying it is a good idea. I am saying it is a Y&R idea, which is a different thing entirely. And then there is Phyllis. And honestly, this one makes the most narrative sense even though it is absolutely wild. Because Phyllis already has a soft spot for Matt. She has been defensive of him, protective of him, almost maternal about him in a way that is clearly going to evolve into something messier if the writers keep pushing it. And Phyllis has her own history. The Danny Romalotti situation is part of her origin story on this show. The way Daniel came into the world is not exactly a clean chapter, so Phyllis does not exactly have a moral high ground to stand on when it comes to judging Matt's past behavior. That does not make any of it okay, but it does mean that Phyllis is one of the few people in Genoa City who is not going to flinch away from Matt the moment his history comes up in conversation. She has things in her own closet. And if Patty starts making moves on Matt, which I think she will, Phyllis is absolutely going to insert herself. Not necessarily because she has deep romantic feelings for him yet, but because Phyllis does not like losing to Patty Williams at anything. Ever. Those two women have history that goes back decades, and it is not warm and fuzzy history. If Phyllis sees Patty circling Matt with those big hopeful eyes, Phyllis is going to decide she wants Matt too. That is just how Phyllis operates. Competition is basically a love language for her. So where does that leave us? I think we are heading towards some version of a triangle with Matt at the center and Patty and Phyllis both pulling in different directions, which is genuinely one of the most unhinged romantic setups Y&R has cooked up in a while. And that is saying something. Whether it goes full love triangle or just plays out as a tug-of-war between these two women while Matt tries to execute Victor's plan against Kane, we will see. But the pieces are on the board, and they are pointing somewhere specific. The bigger question for me is how long this Matt redemption arc can sustain itself before Genoa City catches up to who he really is and what he did. Because that reckoning is coming. It always comes on soaps. You can rehabilitate a character's image for a while. You can surround them with people willing to vouch for them. You can give them remorseful scenes and quiet moments of reflection. But at some point the history crashes back in, and when it does, everyone who stood up for Matt, Victor, Phyllis, whoever ends up in his corner, is going to have to answer for it. And that is actually the most interesting story the show could tell with this material. Not whether Matt can charm Kane, but what happens to everyone around Matt when the truth finally refuses to stay buried. Roger Howarth is doing strong work here. I will give the show that. He knows how to play this kind of character, and he brings real texture to it. But strong performance does not resolve the deeper questions about where this story goes and what it is asking the audience to accept. Those questions are not going away. Keep watching, keep paying attention to the background details, and make sure you are following Soap Dirt wherever you listen to podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all the major platforms. Hit that subscribe button, and we will see you right back here for the next one.